Hello sausages, welcome to Eat the Country headquarters. What am I doing in here? Well, it's freezing cold and dark outside, that's what I'm doing in here. Welcome to episode 2 of Tales from the Cotswold Crate. On this week's episode we have Truffle Hunting. Black gold. It's a truffle, and that's a proper, look at the size of it. Look at that. We have sausage making. We have beating, not that kind of beating.
It's like a military operation. I've no idea what's going on. I haven't a clue what any of it means. I'm just going to wait till someone points at me and goes, "You're in the wrong fucking place," and then I'll get it right.
We have cutting up and skinning a deer really badly.
But I'm not especially good at this. This is only the third or fourth time I've actually done it. But in fairness, if I make a hatchet job, this is going for sausages, so it doesn't really matter.
3 different ways to get the meat out of a pheasant.
Get hold of the feet and pull gently. There it is.
So am I going to do anything with plants this episode? Yes, Nettle Beer. And a couple of interesting recipes to boot. So join me for in the bleak midwinter episode of Tales from the Cotswold Crate.
This is the Cotswold Crate. What is the Cotswold Crate? Well, that's where I live. I live in a shipping container on the edge of the Cotswolds.
Hello sausages, well it's winter. Winter can be a bit crap sometimes. I was going to make a November film and a December film, and now it's January, so we're just going to call this the winter months or the midwinter months film. Now, foraging. Not a lot of foraging going on. There are things you can forage this time of year, but not hugely exciting sorts of things. So we'll focus on something else. We'll focus on meat. This is a meat episode. If you don't like meat, perhaps this is not the episode for you. Why is it a meat episode? Because we're in the game season. Now, game, very controversial. Ooh, we don't like that subject. Well, some do, some don't. I'm of the view, and I get this from my friend Louisa from Let's Eat Wild. Maybe we shouldn't call it game, maybe we should call it wild meat, because game, the word game means fun death, which is not really a great PR, is it? Yes, there are some people that revel in death. Most people I know that are involved in hunting more just enjoy the day out, enjoy the hunting, and they're good shots, so they make sure that when they shoot something, it dies instantly as much as possible. Same with deer stalkers. In fact, all the deer stalkers I know are incredibly good shots, and the animals do not suffer at all. That is a controversial subject. It's something that people aren't always going to agree on. From my perspective, wild meat or game meat, wild meat is better for you. The animals have lived wild and free. It has better nutrients, has lower fat. All in all, it's something which is really, really good for you. And of course, it's absolutely delicious. It is a controversial subject. I know I'm not going to win a lot of you over on that one. From my perspective, I live in the countryside. I don't have to be an advocate for this kind of thing because I believe in it. And I have a fridge full of meat and, well, I think I bought some from Aldi at some point, but the rest of it is all basically from the land. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how to cook it. We're going to talk about how to prepare it. So that's going to be quite interesting because it's not always, it's a bit of a learning curve, even for me. I mean, I will be skinning a deer in this episode, and I'm the first to point out that I'm not very good at it, but I can get the skin off it and I can get the meat off it. I'm not presenting it at some sort of feast to King Charles, so it's all right. It's for me, it's for my table, it's for my pot. So, and also, do you know what? I like to show that I make mistakes because I like to show that you can make mistakes and not be afraid. So if you're going to go out there and think, right, well, I've bought a deer, what the hell do I do with it? Just have a go. I mean, as long as you get the meat off it, it doesn't really matter whether you get the perfect cuts or all those kind of things. It's all good. And you can basically learn from it. You can respect the animal. You can show your kids how it's done. Honestly, it's a win-win. It's something that I've started doing a lot more recently, and I found it incredibly fulfilling. And for some people, it takes a bit of bravery. If you're a little bit squeamish, it can be a bit weird to start with. But actually, do you know what? It's what people have done for years. 100 years ago, people would laugh at you for even finding something that's good. I don't think the word squeamish even existed before about 1900. It's like, squeamish? What are you talking about? Maybe the Victorians invented it. Darling, we're going to have a new word for things that we don't like covered in blood. We're going to call them squeamish. I don't even know where the word comes from. What is the etymology of the word squeamish? Do let me know. Anyway, so this episode, we are going to be talking about meat, but not only meat. We're going to be talking about something which I have wanted to do for a very long time. And I was very fortunate that Ben, the Truffle Hunter, invited me to go truffle hunting. Now, truffles. The thing about truffles, people think, oh my God, truffles, it's like gold, they're worth a fortune. Well, some of them are. The white truffles from Italy, they are worth a lot of money. I mean, I was at a truffle fair and there was a white truffle about the size of a pepper pot worth £1,500. £1,500 for something which basically smells like some old socks. In fact, I think it was Fernie Whittingstall said the smell of truffles is somewhere between sex and socks. Well, people love it. And white truffles are worth a fortune. Now, white truffles don't grow in this country, as far as I know. It tends to just be black truffles, but it's still very, very exciting, and they're very hard to find. And if you don't know where to look, well, you've got very little chance of finding one. However, Ben does know where to look, and not just Ben, his dog Buddy, and Buddy has got a nose like, I mean, dogs' noses are so powerful. Can you imagine, you know, the smell that we get of something like a skunk? Not that I've ever met a skunk, but I've heard that having a skunk anywhere near you is a really bad thing. And if a skunk was to do its skunk junk in your face, I'm not sure skunk junk's a thing, let's call it that. Apparently, that's what every smell is like for a dog. Not that it smells like skunk, but that powerful, you know. So dogs, I mean, everything, this landscape of smells. So Buddy and myself and Ben and a chap called Nick, who's a dog trainer, we all went out to some woods. I won't tell you where those woods are. In the truffle community, you do you do not tell people where they are, because this is quite a well-kept secret. You don't want these places overrun. Something has to have a bit of magic and a bit of sort of mystery to it. And he spent a long time training his dog and running these courses and things, so he's entitled to have his secrets, which I think is fantastic. It was a lovely wood. I can give you some secrets about the kind of wood you're looking at. Now, as Ben pointed out, and there's a lot of stories about different types of trees, and lots of people have their own views on this, but in his experience, it tends to be young beech woods, the sort of beech trees you can just about get your arms around, so that they're good tall trees, but there's still enough light coming through. Now, with fungi, and people often think about fungi being in dark, dingy places, growing in basements and things like that. Or should I say cellars? Not basements. Basements is American. But you do need light for fungi. So let's say we've got a nice beech wood here. Lots of light, not too much ivy on the floor, just sort of a lot of leaf cover on the floor. Also, there are some sort of signals. Now, you may have seen, I did a film once upon a time about seps or porcinis, and there's a mushroom called the miller, which is known as the herald of the sep. And when you find the miller, which is a spermatic mushroom, it does have that smell, does smell a bit like jizz, I'm afraid. But if you find the miller, which is edible, by the way, if you can get past the the smell, it basically can be a signal that there will be some seps or porcinis nearby. Now, in the same way, there's a mushroom called a white saddle, and a white saddle is one of the most peculiar looking mushrooms you'll ever see. It really does look like an alien's penis. However, when you see these and you're in this kind of wood, apparently these are two good signals. Well, we didn't find any white saddles this time because the season was over, but what we did find was a lot of magpie ink caps. You've probably seen a shaggy ink cap, which just has a white dome and sort of, it deliquesces into ink. Deliquesce, what a great word. But these magpie ink caps were there, and they seem to be around that area. So I think maybe that also may be an indicator. So these are sort of little tips for you. You also, they say a south-facing slope, but we went both sides. We found them both sides. But you do need a bit of sunlight, and you need a bit of drainage. If it's too swampy, it's not going to work. The land needs to be drained. I think on chalk is very, very good. And you're probably getting some ideas about the kinds of parts of the country where you're going to find those circumstances. If you want to do this, and you want to get your dog trained to do this, contact Ben, the Truffle Hunter. I'll put his information down below. And he basically will happily take you on a course and train you to do it. He wants people to do this, and he wants dogs to learn. He also makes a living doing it. So I think it's great. He's a really lovely chap, so passionate, and Buddy's amazing. So we went out to these woods. And when we started out, we only found a few teeny little tiny ones. I thought, oh, well, I was pretty amazed that we found anything. I thought, well, this is going to be great.
It's incredibly exciting. We found a truffle almost instantly. Like
We're off the mark.
like a moth to the flame. Buddy, look at this, honestly. I think it's like Truffle Hunting. I would tell you where we are, but I'd have to kill you. But this is very exciting, and basically the Buddy the dog is just going like mad, running all over the place. Now, what's interesting about this is a tiny, teeny little truffle, but I can't actually smell much, but if you cut it open, it will do. And one of the hardest things is that everything looks the same colour as truffles, so it's quite hard to actually find out what is what. But it's actually, oh, look, hello, it's...
Little did I know that once we got going, you start finding some pretty monster truffles.
Black gold. It's a truffle, and that is a proper, look at the size of it. Look at that.
Some of these things are about the size of squash balls, you know, they're quite big. And when you cut them open, you get that fantastic smell. It's kind of an indefinable smell. Some people hate it, some people love it. And we did some quite interesting things with it, actually. We had a lovely soup for lunch that he'd made, and we basically just shaved some truffle on top of that. But even more controversially, for pudding, we had chocolate mousse, and we shaved truffle onto that as well. Which actually I thought was a very unusual idea, but it really worked. Who knew? Sounds very Heston, doesn't it? Very Heston. But it was good. So truffle and chocolate, a great combination. Obviously chocolate truffles, also a good combination, something quite different. So that was wonderful. It was a really, really fun experience. I'm really glad I did it. I want to do it again. If you want to do this, Ben is running courses and days. Now, the truffle season in the UK, well, there's two types of summer truffles, winter truffles. Summer truffles, late summer through to autumn, and then into late autumn, into winter, you have winter truffles. There are different types. I'm not sure of the names. You know me, I don't do Latin names. They're sort of round, spiky things that look like a hedgehog's testicle, but there it is. But I would love, if you want to find out about it, get involved. It's a brilliant day out. So, deer. Now, we've talked about deer and venison before, and now I'm going to talk about specifically skinning and deer. Now, I go to my friend Ditchley Dave. Ditchley Dave shoots a lot of deer. He shoots muntjac deer, amongst other things. Now, muntjac are an introduced species. I believe they're from China originally. A rather peculiar looking creature, very common. They kind of make barking noises. You hear them go, "Rawr!" That's not the noise they make. More barking noises than that. I'm not going to attempt to make something like that. I don't know, a barking kind of noise. You hear them in the fields. Now these things breed like rabbits, and they are everywhere. So they need to be controlled as vermin. I know that's a controversial term, but it's true because they do a lot of damage, and they basically... Is there a more sad sight than seeing 10 or 12 deer basically dying on the side of the road that have been hit by cars because they're not controlled and they don't know how to deal with traffic? Whereas if they are controlled, you're not less likely to see that. An animal gets hit by a car, it may cause an accident. It probably won't die instantly. It's probably going to lie there suffering for hours. Whereas when Ditchy Dave goes out there, he will choose the right animal and he will basically dispatch it painlessly. And I can then buy them from him. Now, we've talked about the value of meat and chicken and stuff in some of my films and how you can save money. Now, I don't have a lot of money. I can tell you that right now. So when it comes to buying things like deer, it's a great way for me to save money. Now, I can buy 2 muntjac off Dave for £20, and they've still got the skin on them. They've been garallocked, which means that the guts and everything have been taken out, but the skin's still on it. And essentially, what you've got there is about £10-12 worth of meat for a tenner. All you've got to do is get it off the animal. Now, how do you do that? Well, now I was sent these knives by a company called Sustainably. Now, I had a knife before that was a bit crap and blunt, and it was very difficult to do this. But these knives are super. In fact, they're so sharp. I wasn't even ready for it. I mean, I put it into the deer, and it went straight through like a bit of butter. And basically, what you're trying to do is you're trying to cut the skin, and you're trying to just cut the skin and not cut into the meat, so that when you pull it off, you're not losing that. So basically, you start off. I'm not going to explain it. Just watch the film. Essentially what you're doing, you're trying to move it like a jacket. You've got to think of it. You've got to get it off the legs. The tricky bit with muntjac is getting it off the legs and around the sort of bottom area. It's a bit difficult there. So that's quite tricky.
Now I'm going to start by saying that I'm not especially good at this. This is only the 3rd or 4th time I've actually done it. But in fairness, if I make a hatchet job, this is going for sausages, so it doesn't really matter, but I'll do my best to try and be as neat as I can. Now, Basically, it's just a jacket that you have to take off, but you've got to remember on something like a Muntjac, this can be quite difficult sometimes to remove. The trick is to try and get the skin and not the meat all off, which when you've got a knife as sharp as this can be a bit tricky. And the area around here is particularly, it's quite sort of hard to sort of get that out. So that might be a bit messy, but we'll see what we can do. So first of all, we're going to go all the way up the line, top of the leg on both sides. I'm going to try not to go too deep. Now it doesn't matter about the feet because I'm just going to take them off later, because I say I don't really need the feet. So sometimes you go all the way up to take the right over the top of the feet, but I'm not really concerned this time. It's not a particularly straight line, but it should be okay. And that should, I think, just be through the skin. Yep, it's just through the skin. Now, I'm also going to go from the centre down by the pelvis here, up the middle of the leg on the other side. So we're separating the two bits. That's right, up there. And on this side as well. This knife is ludicrously sharp. It's a new knife I got from Sonelli. Thanks to a guy from Pheasant Beating who gave me this knife. It is stupidly sharp, but that's good. You have to have something because this skin's quite tough. Okay, so I'm going to go round the leg now, under the skin, just all the way round, so that when I take it off, that'll just leave the fur on the end, which I can just trim off later. First thing I'm going to try and do is going to try and start seeing if I can pull this down. Now you have to sort of trim through some of the sort of gristle there to stop it. But once you get going, now obviously be careful not to take the back leg meat off, the haunch meat off at the same time. So sort of trying to just cut between the skin and the meat. As I say, it doesn't matter a huge amount for me because I'm making sausages out of this, but I suppose if you want to have a really neat haunch, then you want to, I suppose, get it a bit neater than that. Let's cut that away. It's coming down that side. So when you actually get a hold of it, it just comes away like a sort of jacket. Well, of course, if you were a proper stalker, you'd have like hooks, you know, but I don't have any of those. Sorry, madam. There we go. Try not to lose too much of that meat because that's actually really good meat, that haunch meat. But obviously we can't have sausages with fluff in them. That'll almost come right over the neck. Off. The guy from DHL's just turned up in a van. He's probably thinking, what are you doing? There we go. Job's a good one.
Don't worry about it being a little bit messy. You know, you just need to get this off. And also with things like Muntjac, you need to get the skin off relatively quickly within a few days because it can get very difficult to remove. But anyway, you can get it off, you can peel it off, and then you've got left with your carcass. And essentially, it's pretty easy to break up a carcass. The most of the meat is on the back saddle, which is really, you know, either side of the spine, which is the best meat. There are also two little tiny fillets just inside the rib cage, which you can take off. They're very small, but they're also very tasty. The rear legs, the haunches, that's very good meat, and that can be cut into steaks, or you can do whatever you like with that. There's also what's called the trim, which is just under the ribs. That's good for things like sausages. There is a little bit of meat on the front legs, but not much really. And there's a bit of meat on the neck as well, but in this case, the deer had been shot through the neck, so that was a bit damaged. But there's still a lot of meat. You know, this is a couple of hours work, and you end up with a lot of meat in your freezer. Now, what am I going to do with all this venison? Now, I have done various recipes with venison, but what's been very exciting this year is sausages. I've always wanted to make sausages. Now, when I was a kid, I grew up in a village called Lyndhurst in the New Forest, and they used to have a place called John Strange, and they were famous for their venison sausages, which I always found very disappointing, these sausages, to be fair. I have had good venison sausages, so I embarked upon making some sausages. Now, making sausages is not as straightforward as you might think. The first thing you have to realise is things like venison, and in fact pheasants as well, are quite dry meat. There's not a lot of fat on them. So when you make sausages, you have to put fat in the experiment. I tried with bacon. I made some pheasant sausages with bacon, and they were still too dry. So I ended up going down to the butcher's in one of my local towns. I can't remember the name of the town, actually. Lovely chap. And he sold me a load of pork fat. I also got some pork fat off another butcher who literally just trimmed it straight off in front of me. I ended up with about 4 kilos of pork fat, which I put into, I suppose, about 9 or 10 kilos of venison. It wasn't perfect. I still think the sausages were too dry. I think it may even need more fat than that. But you get to a point where there's so much fat in the sausage that when you're cooking it, it's just like there's fat everywhere. Now, the skins I used are from a company called Westenfelder. They're very good skins. They're actually made from intestine. They have got salt on them. You need to just soak them to get them soft. And I've got this fantastic little meat grinder. I can't remember the name of it, but I'll put it in the notes. It's just a hand cranked one, but it's enough for me. And essentially, you just it is quite a phallic process. You have to get the thing wet. It's like putting a great big condom on, and you sort of slide it right back so that you've got the whole thing on. There's about 15 meters of these things on there. It's a lot of sausages. And then when it gets to the end, you push a bit of meat through, and just as the meat fills up, then you tie it off. So you've left yourself some space to tie it off. If you tie it off too soon, you'll get like an air bubble in the end of the sausage. So you tie it off after, and you crank it through. Now, in the sausage mix, before I'm sort of jumping the gun here, aren't I? But again, the sausage mix, I put into venison, I put in some, obviously the fat. I did put some breadcrumbs in. Apparently breadcrumbs help the meat sort of stick together. Well, not many. I don't like the idea of too many breadcrumbs. I like the sausages to be meaty. And I put in winter spices, things like allspice, cinnamon, those kinds of things, honey, ginger. They're just sort of winter types of spice. So these are quite sweet. I actually put in also things like chutney, red currant jelly. I also made up some venison stock from the bones. I put some of that in as well. So there's quite a bit going on there flavour-wise, and actually they turned out pretty well. I actually made a lot of them and gave them to my family as Christmas presents. My family seemed to have refused to eat them, but that's my family. I actually ended up eating them, and I thought they were great. But they're still not quite there. So I actually am on a mission this year to sort of perfect my sausage recipe. I really want to try and make some sausages that I'm really happy with, and then possibly even go into some sort of sausage-related enterprise. I have this phrase, hello sausages, which actually comes from something I used to say to my kids. That might be a name, who knows? But that was very exciting. I would say that, if you want to try something fun, get yourself a meat grinder. Sausage making is great. You can also make things like burgers and meatballs and everything else, and just mince. You can just make mince. I've got a bag of venison mince in my freezer, which I can make venison ragu, like a bolognese in there, which is also fantastic. So it's a really cool thing to have, and it means you can use some of the offcuts, which aren't great. They're not fillets, they're not steaks, but you can still do cool stuff with that. So I would definitely recommend get involved with sausages and mincing up stuff. Very good for game, very good for beef and pork and chicken and everything else as well. So am I going to do anything with plants this episode? Yes, nettle beer. You heard it right, beer made from nettles. Now, how do you make nettle beer? Well, first of all, you get some nettles, get some nice young nettles. There's actually new growth of nettles coming through. Nettles come through in different periods of growth each year. You don't want the old ones, the sort of young tips are what you want. There's a spot down the hill from here where you can get loads of them. So I basically got a big old bag. I don't know how much it was, maybe a couple of kilos. I don't know how much it was. Enough to fill up my sort of big plastic brewing pot. Into that, also some warm water, some yeast and some sugar. I put some brown sugar and some white sugar. Also some lemon juice. I was following a recipe I found online. In retrospect, I don't think that's a great recipe. I might try something different next time. Essentially, it's a pretty easy process. How did it turn out? Well, there was booze in there, and there's no doubt about that. I wasn't too impressed with the flavour. The flavour sort of tasted to me a little bit like, when you have beer at the bottom of the barrel and it's got that kind of slightly sort of tangy taste to it. It just didn't quite work for me, but I'm going to try again. It's something I want to persist with. I know nettles are incredible things. Nettles are fantastic. If you don't know much about nettles, they're full of vitamins. They're really good for health. They're really good for urinary infections and kidney infections. They're a great diuretic. You can sting pain on your back. You can use the stings to sort of bring blood to the surface and help with back pain and stuff. You can use the stings to build up a sort of histamine response in your cells so that it can prevent hay fever. I mean, they're fantastic things. So nettle stems were used in the past for the same sorts of things that we would use hemp rope for. So sail making, net making. They even made uniforms from nettles during World War I because they ran out of resources. So that's where the phrase, obviously, full nettle jacket comes from. He's here all week. Who doesn't love a dad joke? Dad joke. But amazing things. I mean, there's loads. The Romans used to sting themselves to actually make themselves to try and stay warm. And I thought, what a peculiar thing. It's a bit S&M, that, isn't it? But then I suppose maybe if I was forced to sort of sit on the border of like Northumberland in the middle of winter in nothing more than a skirt and sandals, I'd probably do the same thing. Although the Romans did do some very strange things. Fish custard, for example. Anyway, I digress. So basically, the nettle beer, definitely worth a go, very easy to make, and I'm going to try it again, and hopefully next time it'll be more delicious. But every experiment, you learn every time, don't you? So, pheasants and beating. What is beating?
Beating. Well, it's like a military operation. I've no idea what's going on. I'm here with Kev, who's one of the gamekeepers on the site. He's told me some directions. Haven't a clue what any of it means. I'm just going to wait till someone points at me and goes, "You're in the wrong fucking place," and then I'll get it right. So we're driving the birds that way. Guns are down the bottom of that hill, and I tell you what, it's an absolutely perfect, crisp winter day. I am absolutely loving it out here. I've got work to do. Should be at home. But I mean, when it's like this, I mean, it is absolutely stunning. Anyway, on with the beat. You have a bunch of people lined up who are going to shoot the birds, and the birds have to be driven towards the guns. And that's what the beaters do. So essentially, you have a flag, just like this. No flag, no country. And you wander around waving it, and you try and make a sort of a cracking sound with it, sort of make a little bit more noise. Then you can make sounds. Now, I don't have any specific sounds. I tend to just shout things like "Oi!" But some people do all sorts of strange sort of bird impressions. It's yes, it's quite an experience in a fun way.
Around fields get covered in mud, and you have a bit of a laugh. And the birds, well, as I say, most of them don't get shot. Particularly in this case, people weren't very good shots at all, but some of them do. And you spend the whole day, and you meet people, and everyone you meet is most of the people you meet are actually just standard working class folk. This idea, that the shooting community, a bunch of posh people. Most of them really are not, I guarantee you. They're just farmers, most of them. And this is a nice small farm shoot. I think the bag was 40 birds, not these awful commercial shoots where they shoot hundreds and even thousands of birds, which I think is absolutely an abomination. I'm not behind that at all. This is a small community event, and the birds will get eaten, and in this case, mostly eaten by me. But the beating's fun. You're walking through the woods, you keep falling over. There's lots of banter going on. You have a few drinks. There's a few beers. They have 11sies, and they have lunch. They have things like sloe gin and claret, and it's just a really lovely day out. They usually have like a nice venison casserole. On this occasion, Pook, who's the woman who runs it, and then her and her husband Sam run the estate. They made a wonderful like a spiced pumpkin soup and some fantastic sausage rolls. I mean, it's just heaven. Absolutely, salt of the earth people out in the fields. Beautiful, clear, sunny day. Now, actually, strangely enough, for pheasant shooting, that kind of weather isn't very good. You really want to have it a little bit cloudy and a little bit windy, because when it's very cold, the birds tend not to fly so much. They tend to sort of huddle up and sort of hide in the bushes. But there was still some, and it was a good day out. I know it's controversial, but at the end of the day, there were a lot of pheasants left over, and I was the person to take them. And I actually was. They said it was the end of the season. It was the last shoot they were doing this season. They said take as many as you like. So I took 32 pheasants. Now, what the hell do you do with 32 pheasants? Well, there are different ways to deal with pheasants. One of them is called field dressing, and this is how that's done.
So how do you do it? Well, this is a cock pheasant. Tends to be a bigger bird. They tend to eat a bit better. The first thing you need to do is take the head off, which is man on the guillotine, I'm afraid. Relatively straightforward process. Right, get rid of that. Sorry, old chap. And then we have the body of the beast. So pull the wings out straight, like so. Feet onto the wings. Feet in close like that. Get hold of the feet and pull gently. There it is. That bit you don't need. And there you have the breasts of the animal. Still got the liver, which we can possibly use, and the heart. All that meat and that carcass, when you're taking the breasts off, and go straight into stock. Breast you can discard, but that way you're using more of the animal. It's very simple, just a sort of a gentle pull. As long as the animal is fresh, if it's a 3 or 4 day old pheasant, it may not work. But these from yesterday works absolutely fine. Look at that, look at all that meat. And that rather stringy bit is not particularly attractive.
The thing you do, which is more time consuming and more difficult, and I'm really not very good at this, is plucking the pheasant, because obviously that way you're going to get a little roasting bird. But this is how it's done. But I promise you, I'm not very good at this. I'm still learning that.
No, I'm not a pheasant plucker, nor am I a pheasant plucker's son. Now, whilst pheasant plucking is one of the best ways, if you can do it, because you get the whole bird and you can roast the bird, I would say it's quite difficult. I'm saying that because I'm actually not particularly good at it. But for you lovely people, I will attempt to pluck this pheasant the way that I have been shown to do it. As I say, it's quite tricky to get all the feathers off and get it looking beautiful without tearing the skin, but I'll do my best. This is a hen pheasant. First thing you need to do is get it ready for plucking, which is to get rid of some of the bits and bobs. So you want to go right down to the base of the neck there. Take that off. You want to take the wings off at the joint. You want to take the legs off. You want to pull out the tail feathers, because they're a bit of a pain and they're quite easy to remove. And from then on, really, it's as best as you can do. You want to try and be gentle with the feathers, because you're trying not to tear the skin. So you just kind of work your way around bit by bit. You can always go back and tidy it up afterwards. You want to get the bulk of the feathers off first, give you confidence, to make you feel like you're doing something properly. Just a few tricky ones on the legs here, but we're getting there. If you rush this, you will make a mess of it. You see, so if you're patient, you take your time, you'll end up with something like that. Still a couple of feathers, but I can just pick them off in a second. Basically there. Now, we're going to need to get the guts out, which you want to get right, because if you don't really want to pierce the bowels and stuff, because it's a bit smelly, and if you do, it's not a disaster, but you need to wash it out. So just above the end of the breastbone there, there's a little membrane. You just want to just sort of snip through that, and that'll give you access. And then you just basically want to work your fingers inside and slowly ease it out. You sort of feel the membrane like a sort of bag, and you just work your fingers around and sort of pull your way through it. And there you can see all the bowels, everything are intact, and haven't caused a horrible stinky mess, which is good. And there's your roasting bird. Needs a little bit of a rinse just to clean it out. It's good to go.
The simplest way to deal with a pheasant, and I advocate this a lot, because people, they'll get a brace of birds, they don't know what to do with them. The simplest way is just to breast them out. Now, it couldn't be any easier. There's no plucking involved. This is how it's done. You take your bird, you reach onto the breast of the bird, and you pull up the skin. Now, the thing with gutting animals or cutting up animals is not to disturb the guts and things and the bowels. You don't want any of that, because that will disturb the meat. So you want to avoid doing that. So you pinch up the skin, take a sharp knife or some scissors and just cut through, and you have a little tiny hole, and you just slide your hands in and pull out. And as you can see, suddenly the breasts are revealed. Very, very good. And you can push down, push the gullet out, so that reveals the bottom of the breast. You've got the whole shape there. Then what you do is take your very sharp knife. I take my lovely little bony knife from Sinelli, and then just literally run down the bone of the carcass underneath. Now, it might look a little bit messy underneath. Don't worry about that. It's all fine. Just right the way down, and cut round the back, and then you'll find there's a bone down by the front wing. Just cut around that, and then just lift out the breast, and there you've got it. Now, don't worry if it's got a few feathers and stuff on it. I had to do 32 birds, and there's a lot of feathers and stuff. I put them all in a big pan, and then later on I ran them under the tap and washed all the feathers away. And then I basically had a lot of meat. I mean, in my case, something like 5 bags of pheasant breasts have gone into my freezer. Now, what do you do with pheasant? Well, pheasant's the same as chicken. I mean, it's not as fatty as chicken. It's got a slightly stronger taste, but essentially what you can do with chicken, you can do with pheasant. And the idea I had was actually an idea that my friend Lucy Eggleston sent me, was to make goujons. Now, actually, I used to work in a pub years ago, and one of my favourite little recipes they had was garlic chicken goujons. So I thought, well, I'll look up a recipe for that. And essentially what you do is you get a bowl, you get your pheasant breasts, you cut them up into small sort of goujon bite-sized sort of pieces, like a chicken tender or something like that. And you put them into the bowl, and I mixed up a sort of, not a batter, it's basically eggs, because eggs will stick and they'll cook obviously properly, oil, and then things that I like. You know, I put some chili in there, I put some Worcester sauce in there, I put some paprika, salt and pepper, etc. Mix it all up, put it on top, and then squidge it all down, and then you just sort of marinate it for as long as you want. You can marinate it for 10 minutes, you can marinate it overnight. From some breadcrumbs, I happen to have a box of breadcrumbs, peculiarly left over from a date. A girl came over and she bought some things to cook and didn't end up cooking them. I'll leave that to your imagination as to why that's the case. But I mixed them up with some of my own homemade bread. I make my own sort of little white bloomer bread, so mix that together. Again, I put some more chili in there, more salt and pepper and stuff to make a sort of spicy breadcrumb thing, and I dip them in there. And basically oven on at about 200, 215 degrees. Put the goujons onto greaseproof paper into the oven for about 15, 20 minutes. And they come out lovely and crispy. And then basically I just happened to have some sweet chili dipping sauce, but you could make your own sauce from whatever you like. Fantastic little snack with a glass of sparkling wine, or in my case, a glass of red. There was a variation on that, which I didn't make a film about, but here's the photo. I had a big bag of salt and vinegar crisps left over from I was out and about, and I didn't end up eating them, and they'd got a bit crushed up, and I thought, here's an idea. So what I did is I got the salt and vinegar crisps and I put them into the mixer and mixed it all up until they're basically into sort of like a fine breadcrumb type powder. And then my remaining goujons, because I've still got more in the fridge now, I just dipped them in there, put them in the oven. And it worked fantastically. The salt and vinegar with that crunchiness, with the chili and the garlic. I mean, just fantastic. I made about 15 of them, and I sat down and ate the whole lot. I'm a total pig. I'm no apologies for that. They were absolutely delicious. So you see, just because it's a scary wild bird with lots of big feathers and things, doesn't mean you can't just eat it like a piece of chicken. And it's good, it's tasty, and it's really, really good for you. That's kind of been what I've been up to this winter. A little bit of meat, a little bit of plants, a little bit of fungi, inventing things. The next episode will be getting into the beginning of spring, hopefully towards the start of the foraging season, late January, February. I'm really excited, actually. I'm really excited about spring. I'm done with winter. It's freezing cold this morning. I'm sat here doing this, and my boiler's not working, so I didn't get to have a warm shower this morning. It's freezing cold, so bring on the bloody spring. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that episode. Hope there's something to be learned there, and I'll see you next time.